Marine Corps' rich tradition is on public display all over Parris Island. There's a statue of Iron Mike, an iconic tribute to Parris Island graduates killed in World War I. Across the street is Molly Marine, originally conceived as an aid to recruiting women during World War II. There are buildings that date back to the Marines' earliest days here, and a museum to preserve and promote the heritage. And every graduation Friday, there's a traditional color ceremony for families and guests. The band plays, the colors are raised. Marine history is honored.
3 October 1918, during World War I, 4th Marine Brigade, along with the U.S. 2nd Division.
And the commanding general addresses the crowd.
So whether you're a mother, father, grandparent, coach, mentor, just a friend that's had a hand in developing this young Marine as to what they are today, I say thank you. You probably saw when you came in here, you saw a sign that says, "We make Marines." Well, I think that there are many roads that lead to Parris Island.
That may be, but that sign is on the only road that leads onto the island, an indication of just how isolated it truly is. Parris Island has just over 8,000 acres, but 60% of it is tidal salt marsh. The island has a long military history. The French built a fort near the current main gate in the 1560s, and the Spanish built their own on this lonely-looking site when the French left after less than 2 years. After the English arrived, cotton plantations came to dominate the landscape.
It will be during the American Civil War that the United States Navy will capture this region in 1861 and establish a huge base here.
Plantation owners fled, former slaves became landowners.
And established farms. They also have a setup where black soldiers and black sailors can buy property on Parris Island at reduced rates. So Parris Island, before the Marines got here, was a freedmen community, former slaves. They had about 5 or 6 churches out here, a number of small farms, for the most part growing cotton.
Only one tombstone is left from the large freedmen's cemetery. The Navy abandoned Parris Island to the farmers after the Civil War until
in the 1890s, they start developing it into a major naval station. They build on Parris Island the largest dry dock in the United States up to that time, to take the largest battleships that are built.
Political winds blew the naval operation upstream to Charleston, leaving only a Navy hospital and brig run by the Marines. The Marines tried running an officers' candidate school here, but the only way to get to the island was by boat, and the students complained about the isolation.
What really brings the Marine Corps and the training depot to Parris Island is going to be World War I.
And suddenly there was a need for a larger training facility. Navy Secretary Franklin Delano Roosevelt, with the urging of a South Carolina congressman, established the Marine Corps Recruit Depot at Parris Island.
And by 1919, just as the war ends, they purchased the entire island, about 6,000 acres, and take over the entire Parris Island for recruit training. And we've had the island and some smaller islands around the base ever since.
The island continued to be mostly farmland through the 1920s and 1930s. The outbreak of World War II brought another surge in the need for training facilities. A causeway was finally built from the main highway to Parris Island, and it became the all-marine enclave it is today. There was such a need for instructors that one former DI told us he got the assignment when he was still a private first class. 205,000 men received their recruit training here during the Second World War. 138,000 would be trained for the Korean conflict. That number would jump to 250,000 during the Vietnam era. Over the years, the training has been in more or less continuous evolution, but there are constants. New Marines have always been trained in marksmanship. They've always had a swimming requirement. There has always been rigorous physical training. There has always been close order drill, and lots of it. Oh, and discipline. Lots and lots of that. The former DI who shot these home movies in the early 1970s talks about the motivation ditch. He says he'd send a belligerent recruit out for a few hours in the motivation ditch, and he'd come back a different man. And that DI says the training was even tougher when he went through it in 1958.
There's sort of the joke here that as soon as they graduate, then they look at the recruits and go, well, you don't know what it was like in the old Corps. Recruit training has changed a great deal. It's a lot more sophisticated than it had been in the past, but it still is a very difficult, very grueling experience.
By the way, the motivation ditch disappeared in the 1980s and wouldn't be tolerated today.
I come from an island in the Carolina sand, where I was broke down and built up and reborn, a fighting man. And my blood runs red, white and blue. I'll brave the cold, the rain, the pain, and the bullets, so you don't have to.
Since World War II, every male recruit from west of the Mississippi has been sent to San Diego for training, and those from east of the Mississippi come to Parris Island. All female recruits have been shipped to South Carolina since 1949. They've been going through the same regimen as the men since 1988. The Crucible was introduced onto the schedule in 1996, a culminating test that forces recruits to apply skills and knowledge learned over the course of boot camp.
They put bayonets at the end, right? Assaulted the enemy.
Yes, sir.
Remember that?
Yes, sir.
Hey, why did they do that?
Though the Crucible relies heavily on high-stress activities, time is also set aside for discussion of core values, duty, honor, commitment,
It's all about what you do on your own time.
and for the DIs to share practical knowledge about life as a Marine.
Biggest thing for me when I talk to the recruits is I try to prepare mentally for what they're going to see when they leave the gates of Parris Island. When I went out there as a PFC in the fleet, things that if I would have known would have better prepared me as a young Marine in the Marine Corps.
Semester hours over the other Marines.
The recruiting slogan says, "The few, the proud, the Marines." The Marines have always wanted to be different.
Probably Marines set themselves apart from the very beginning because they were stationed on board ships to keep the sailors in line. So that right there made them a little more superior to the other men they're serving with. And as we go through time, we find that the Marines use this sort of concept for recruitment and such. There is a mystique to being a Marine. They're supposed to have harder training.
And the young Marines who find their way to Parris Island, they do come by different roads and for a variety of reasons.
Why be a Marine? Who wouldn't want to be part of the best?
I want to be hardcore. That's how I am. My family's military, and nobody was in the Marines yet.
My dad was in the Marines, and 3 of my cousins are Marines right now, and they always been idols for me, and I always looked up to them, and it's just something I always wanted to do.
Since I had a really good, decent life here, might as well give something back. So I joined the Marine Corps.
Doing something high above expectations, being looked upon for, and feel pride for what I do.
This recruit saw a lot of things going wrong overseas and wanted to help out in Iraq. That's why this recruit joined the 03, sir. And there's money for college. This recruit hopes to go to college.
I feel personally that if you live in this country, you need to defend it. You know, you don't get invited to someone's house for dinner and not offer to help with the dishes. I'm not going to live in this country and not help it in a time of need.